Chapter 7 Activities and Interests and Bugs. When I think of any activities I did as a kid that I actually enjoyed, singing is what stands out. I absolutely loved and still love singing. I super loved swimming too, but man, not the lessons so much. But I'll talk about that in a minute. Most people generally like activities. Kids I knew went to summer camps and loved it. They took dance lessons and happily performed at recitals. They played sports, had hobbies and strong interests, and a lot of them could easily answer that big question, what do you want to be when you grow up? Jesus, I didn't know then. But anyway, the summer that I was 6, my parents, or maybe just mom, figured I should be signed up for swimming lessons. This would be at a nearby outdoor public pool. You know how most kids seem to just naturally know how to go underwater without plugging their noses, and their noses seem to know what to do to keep them from snarfling up water and nearly choking to death? Yeah, I was not one of those kids. I swear there was like a 1-minute lesson right at the start of being in the pool and everyone showing how we blow bubbles out of our little noses into the water. Well, that's easy enough, right? Then we had to go underwater to try it out not long after. Water, flowing like a great river up my nose and down my throat, coming up coughing and sputtering. And that was pretty much the theme for every lesson. Every time we had to go underwater, not really having that innate ability to keep water out of my head. Popping back up, choking, coughing, not really looking forward to going underwater again, and wishing I could just plug my nose like I did at home. My mother would be standing there on the other side of the fence watching, and wishing that moment would finally come when I wouldn't come up coughing and sputtering. So what was the takeaway from swimming lessons? I learned how to dog paddle. I proudly showed off this skill in our above-ground swimming pool at home. Watch me swim, Daddy! Okay, Shorty. Paddle, 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 woodenly but successfully to the other side of the pool. Good job! I never went for more lessons after that summer. Luckily, I did teach myself to swim, and pretty well for an amateur if I do say so myself. I discovered swimming masks, as we called them, not goggles, but masks as a kid, and that changed my swimming life. Brother had one first, so I would wear it when he wasn't. That put me on a more level swimming playing field. I could go underwater no problem, no having to plug my nose, able to use all 4 of my limbs. I loved the swimming mask. I would sink to the bottom of the pool, and for those seconds before I bobbed back up, I would kind of recline down there and look up at the wavy, glassy surface, the sun rays refracting through, the warped outlines of the world above, just staring at that beautiful mirror surface as it shimmered above me. It was something that embarrassed me a lot in my youth, having to plug my nose. Most of my friends took swimming lessons, like serious lessons, until they either got their lifeguard badge or achieved a high level of swimming proficiency, or they got really good at summer camp. Horrifying imagining going to summer camp when I was a kid. Being shy in some cabin with girls you never met before. Trying to sleep in a weird bed at night. Being surrounded by bugs and mosquitoes, and your cabin having bugs and mosquitoes in it all the time, and just having to deal with it. Absolutely horrifying imagining having to get in there with other girls who no doubt had some years of swimming lessons under their belts, not really having those trained skills, and not knowing how to go underwater without plugging your damn nose. And even worse, having to do swim races and swim games and competitions. Good Lord! The whole thing sounded overwhelming. Listen. I've had a problem with bugs my whole life. If there is one mosquito in the house, I can't rest until it's located and flattened. When I was a teen even, I was freaked by that whiny mosquito hum right in my ear if I was trying to sleep. My light would go on, and I'd be awake and scanning that room, bleary and tired, waiting and waiting for it to land on one of the walls where I could see it so I could take a National Geographic magazine and squash the frigging thing. I was absolutely in fear of that sound in my ear. Sometimes I would go wake up kid sister, who I shared a room with, and coax her to come sleep next to me, and then I'd kick her back out at dawn, back to her own bed. Poor kid. One summer while our parents were away, sister left the patio screen door open so our cat could come and go as she pleased, so sister didn't have to keep getting up and down from her toys to open and close the door. There were loads of mosquitoes upstairs in our bedroom by that evening. Man, I don't even want to think about it. One time there was a centipede on my bed. I was probably in my early 20s by that point, and sister in her teens. We were both doing a pathetic job of getting it out of the room. She had this fancy decorative bamboo cane in her hand that belonged to Dad. I'm not sure what she hoped would happen, but we were standing there assessing that big hairy bug with agony when suddenly she took that cane and whacked it on my bed. The monster took off. It raced with many-legged bug lightning speed to the end of the bed and literally leapt off to the floor below. We both shrieked so loud it hurt our throats. "Get it! Get it!" I was screaming and doing that bug dance, that useless terror jig that involves lots of hopping around but never actually goes anywhere. Sister chased after it with a cup, but it was too fast and it ran right under her bed. "Oh, great," she said. It was the funniest damn thing. But yeah, I had a problem with bugs for as long as I can remember. Is it nature versus nurture? Perhaps it is both. Brother and I were the same though. The only difference was that as a boy, he tried harder to not shriek if he saw one. He's the one who, as a very little kid, freaked out over potato bugs or roly-polies or whatever the hell you call them and said, "Ah, diters!" So forever after, they were diters in our family. Sometimes you forget that these words are just family specific, and maybe you try to tell other people a story involving diters, and then you realize when they don't know what the hell you're talking about, that it's not a universal word. We hated bugs, and seemed to have our fair share of them in the house. One year, we returned home in the evening after a long drive back from our summer vacation. While away, the couple of fleas that we didn't realize our pet dog had multiplied enthusiastically and become a small infestation upstairs. We all had to stand outside in the driveway, bleary and tired, and wait while Dad sprayed a can of Raid around. "All clear! You can come back into your toxic house now." Sometimes, in the summer, our upstairs would have big black ants. Ugh! I'd be playing away happily with my toys, and one would come racing erratically out from nowhere, all crazy ant-twitching antenna. I would quickly get one of my little golden books, throw it on top of the ant, and stomp on it with my little foot, making sure I heard the crunch. We'd also whack bugs with one of the handy National Geographic mags we had, thanks to that subscription Dad had one year. Most of the books or magazines that were upstairs had a squashed bug on the front or back cover. Sometimes there were live, terrifying bugs left under a cup, with many books on top, waiting for Dad to deal with. Mom was also not the biggest fan of bugs, though not nearly as ridiculous as us kids. Sister wasn't even as bad as Brother and me. However, Mom particularly did not enjoy the cicada that once came wrapped up in a fresh clean sheet after she'd brought the linens in off the clothesline. Yeah, Mom wasn't as ridiculous about bugs as we were, but she certainly had her shining moment with the leech. Dad was very sentimental about cottage country. He loved going up north, and he always wanted us to love it as much as he did. As a kid, his paternal grandparents sold their home in town and lived up north for a number of years. Up north generally meant a couple or more hours' drive north of Toronto. Places like Huntsville, Sprucedale, Dorset. Dad had the most wonderful, idyllic memories of being at his grandparents' swimming in the lake, exploring around through the woods, having wonderful, wholesome 1950s adventures. He just loved it. Us? Not so much. It was a long drive up north. All the luggage and such would be loaded onto the top of the station wagon, and tied down with that yellow rope dads always had in their garages and sheds, possibly even covered with a tarp. It always felt exciting to load into the car and set off, even though Mom was extremely grouchy after packing everything and not really loving the idea of going on vacation anyway. But Dad was in such high spirits for a road trip that you couldn't help but get caught up in that enthusiasm. Poor Mom was also terrified about driving on the highway. She'd been in some terrible car accidents as a teen, so she was not the most relaxed passenger. She would close her eyes and always say in this sing-song way, "Oh my God," as Dad merged onto the highway with rocket speed. Brother and I would be bugging Mom, asking when we could take our seat belts off. When could we go into the back of the station wagon to play, goof around, and lie down on that flat section with the blanket spread over top? Mom would say, "Just wait until we're on the highway and then you can take your seat belts off." I kid you not. See, according to parents back then, and maybe not even all parents, merging onto the highway was dangerous. But once you were on the highway, you were good to go. Smooth sailing. So Dad would hurtle onto the highway, and then we get the okay from Mom and Dad, and we promptly unclick those restrictive and uncomfortable lap belts off. Hell, the only time all the lap belts were even accessible was right before a big road trip. Most of the time they were buried down behind the seat, and Dad would have to shove his hand down there and dig them out. That's how little we used them. Brother and I would clamber over the back seat and into the station wagon bed, where we could sit up hunched over, but mostly lie down with our heads on our pillows we brought from home, giggling with excitement, watching the clouds and tops of trees out the side windows. That's if there was room back there, of course. Usually it was full of stuff we needed to bring, and the cooler full of food, drinks, and snacks. The highway would be full of other cars similar to ours, luggage and vacation stuff loaded up on the roof. Happy, rambunctious kids bouncing around inside their vehicles. Travelers flying down the highway with fellow travelers, some staying with you for miles, some taking earlier exit ramps to their own exciting destinations. Mom would always pack an amazing lunch for trips, with delicious sandwiches, homemade cookies, chocolates, grapes, chips, and you could wash it all down with a warm, tinny can of off-brand cola. We'd usually stop at a popular picnic rest stop that was just outside of Toronto, and it always felt like we'd been on the road for a long time by that point. But the most exciting part about road trips was that Mom got us toys. 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 Actual toys. Because you didn't get toys any old time back then, or if you did, you didn't live in our house. We did not get random toys. We got toys at Christmas and our birthdays. I got a Barbie for graduating kindergarten, and I somehow managed to con my mother into grudgingly getting me a Barbie for passing grade 1. I thought it was a thing, and this would be happening every school year after kindergarten. Turns out, I was wrong. But we did not get random toys. We wanted them. Believe you me, we wanted them. Every time we'd go to the local department store, after having a free-for-all in the toys section with the other unsupervised kids, we wanted toys bad. Nope. For some reason, I longed for one of those little mesh bags of shiny marbles. I always thought marbles were awesome. Little glass balls of wonder. Never got any. I really wanted one of those generic hand-size balls, though. Those shiny red, white, and blue rubber balls. God, I wanted one of those balls. That cage filled with those shiny red, white, and blue balls. Not happening. No, wait. I did get one of those balls once, and I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you about the ball and sock craze. There was a year in the early 80s when school kids, or at least the kids at my school, were going through a huge thing with a ball in a sock. You literally put a ball in a sock, and hopefully the sock was on the longer side, and then you stood against the wall of the school and winged your sock back and forth, letting the ball bounce from one side of you to the other. Seriously, that was the thing, and everyone was bananas for it. I wanted to join in so bad, but I didn't have a ball. I mean, if you were lucky, one of your friends would part with their ball and sock for a minute so you could try it out too, but they were just as obsessed as everyone else. Somehow, I must have bugged Mom enough, because she actually relented and got me one of those precious red, white, and blue balls. Oh my God! So I got an appropriate sock, and I was so ready for school the next day. I was walking to school with a few friends that morning. We were cutting behind the little plaza, and one of my friends bugged me so much to just let her try it. Please! Okay, fine. Just once. She took the end of the sock in her hand, brought her arm up high over her head, and with all her strength whipped the ball down onto the ground. It bounced up with great height and momentum and sailed right onto the roof of the grocery store. Our jaws all dropped. I burst into tears. My friends tried to comfort me. The thrower was horrified and repentant. "Don't worry," one of the girls said with her arm around me. "We'll go inside and see if they can get it." We came around to the front, went into the grocery store, and she asked some guy working there if someone could go up on the roof, please, and get my ball and sock down. The guy seemed sympathetic, but sorry, that wasn't going to happen. Woe and despair. And there I stood, at first recess, watching an endless stream of kids lined up all along the walls of the school, happily winging their balls and socks back and forth, while I watched in great sorrow, awash in self-pity, crying a tiny bit. Stupid ball and sock. Anyway, like I said, we rarely got toys just for the sake of getting toys. On vacation, though, we got toys, and amazing ones that occupied us for most of the drive, which I guess was the point. One year I got a set of color forms. Color forms were thin pieces of vinyl with different pictures printed on top, cut in various shapes that you could lay on top of a smooth, laminated paper background, and they'd stick, basically like the magnetic stickers we know today. My color forms was a set featuring a cute cartoony girl in a kitchen setting. So the background had the stove and table and fridge, etc., and there were lots of exciting peel and stick things like pies and cakes and milk to place artfully on the background. One of the best toys I ever got. It was a long, hot, and tiring drive to Huntsville, though, and by the time we got there, we'd peel our sweaty shirt backs off those hot vinyl car seats, grateful to finally be there. One year we were staying in what I remember as a fairly rustic cottage. It seemed fun and exciting to me because I was still a kid, and believed that if Dad thought it was an adventure, surely it had to be. There wasn't really a beach on our side, but you basically waded into the lake from small rocks to bigger, slimier rocks and some murky-looking cottage water. There was a little rowboat with paddles at that cottage, and one day Dad was happily passing the time paddling around not too far from shore. I was standing on a flat rock above ankle-deep water. Mom and Brother were standing in the shallows nearby, scrutinizing what was below. Mom with a cigarette in her mouth. They were both squatting down and pointing at something. "There's one there," one of them said casually. Then Brother pointed out something on Mom's leg, and suddenly Mom and Brother were losing it. Especially Mom. Mom was freaking out, dancing around, shrieking, both of them going berserk, and then they flailed out and off together toward the cottage. Well, that was it. Little Karen concluded there was clearly a monster in the water, so I stood there on that rock, afraid to get off, crying away. Meanwhile, Dad saw and heard the theatrics, didn't know what the hell was happening, only that I was left on a rock bawling away, and frantically paddled back in. He rescued me, and we raced up to the cottage to see what was going on. It turns out that Mom had a leech on her leg. She tried to brush it off, and when she couldn't brush it off, something in her brain snapped. She raced off to the cottage with Brother in tow, and while inside, tried to pull it off again, failed, stuck her lit cigarette on the leech, and when that did nothing, dumped half a box of the salt we'd brought on it, and finally it fell off. I didn't feel too great about swimming there after that. We had a cricket in the basement of my childhood home once. It was in the laundry room, and mostly stayed under the extra fridge that was in there. But it wouldn't always stay under the fridge. Sometimes it would be out, in the open, visible. and we couldn't catch it because one of my siblings or I would scream and it would quickly dart back under the fridge to safety. The fridge was right next to our rather hideous, roughly crafted basement shower. Very bare bones, that shower. It had a shower curtain over it, but once you opened that, you were stepping out into that cold, cave-like, unfinished basement, and there were daddy longlegs in the corners of that shower that the water didn't touch. I'd be in there as a kid, washing as quickly as I could while keeping a constant eye on that spider. I don't care if it's not technically a spider. To my brain, it's a spider. Dad, who always tried to convince us that these bugs were our friends, joked one time that a spider handed him the soap during his wash. Well, anyways, Brother came out from having a shower one day, and there was the cricket, all boldly out from under the fridge, and all, "Ha ha, here I am, jerk! Enjoy getting around me, go back upstairs." Brother came upstairs and humorlessly declared, "I hate the cricket." You know who wasn't one bit scared of bugs? Dad. Dad, who was sometimes amused by us and often sighingly exasperated at how ridiculous we were. He would pick up spiders by one leg and throw them outside instead of killing them. "They're not going to hurt you," he'd say impatiently, even as Brother and I were running off in terror to seek safety. But don't think Dad was innocent. He also enjoyed chasing us with those bugs from time to time. This is most of the reason we would take off to try to hide. I'd be off in the depths of Mom's closet upstairs, panting quietly among the hanging clothes, and Dad would be out there somewhere, pretending to be the bug. Karen, where did you go? Don't be scared. I'm your friend." Hell with that. When Brother and I were kids, Dad would take us out occasionally to look for golf balls, and so we'd head off to the wild field that was adjacent to the golf course. Dad tried to make it sound like a fun adventure and a challenge, like, see how many we could find. Picture a field with grasses and plants nearly up to your kid waist, with a ringing buzz of crickets, cicadas roaring away somewhere in the distance, bugs hopping and crisscrossing the way before you. But Daddy needs golf balls. Better get to work. Ooh, there's one. Is this a good one, Daddy? No, that one has a smile on it. Keep looking. Super hot out. Itchy grasses whipping your legs. Brother recalls that time I was walking just ahead of him and there was a huge bug on my back, and he started making the panic sounds, and pointing at my back. Dad impatiently swatted it off and lectured that it's just a bug. Then there was a mosquito on Dad's bare back. It was the shirtless 70s after all, and its body was bright red and huge and fat with Dad's blood. We both pointed and freaked. Dad wasn't impressed. Not sure how many balls Brother and I managed to find, but I think Dad got at least enough for a decent game the next time. So it's kind of sad, because Dad always loved outdoorsy things with a great fearlessness and appreciation of the rustic. The rest of us didn't really. There was a camping trip we all went on when Sister was a toddler. We had 2 musty tents that we'd borrowed from different relatives. We never seemed to own this stuff. And enough sleeping bags we'd managed to scrounge up for all of us. That first night, Brother and I were in one tent. Mom, Dad, and Sister were in the one right beside. After goofing off for long enough to get told off about how noise travels out in the quiet woods, then probably some bugging, then maybe some fighting, I eventually managed to fall into a deep sleep. Well, deep enough that I didn't hear the monsters that Mom and Brother had. I'm assuming Dad had fallen asleep too, because I'm pretty sure men can sleep almost anywhere. Anyway, what had most likely happened is that a couple of raccoons wandered into our camping area, started fighting, and while snarling and sputtering their furious, aggressive raccoon sounds, barreled into the tent Mom was in before they sped away. I woke up in time to hear Mom hissing, "What was that? Oh my God." She and Brother were whispering back and forth frantically about what the hell could that be that they heard. I was confused and rapidly becoming alarmed. "What happened?" I asked. "You didn't hear it. How did you not hear it? I can't believe Karen didn't hear it. You don't want to know." Much shock and disbelief, loads of terror and panic. Dad, annoyed and impatiently checking over our campsite, trying to reassure everyone it was probably just some wild animal. There was nothing there now. It's gone. Mom wasn't having it. She grabbed sister and a blanket and locked herself into the station wagon to sleep there. We did question over the years why sister was more worthy of being saved from man-eating monster creatures than brother and I. At any rate, I cried for a bit and Dad came in our tent to sleep between the two of us to keep us safe, which actually just made things hot and crowded and noisy, with Dad snoring away until we were both exhausted enough to fall asleep. Mom had several mosquitoes with her and sister in the extremely stuffy car, and she had a terrible sleep. So that was about it for the more rustic vacations. We did try one last cottage up north trip when I was 13 and sister was almost 7. It was in a little town called Dorset. By that time, I was old enough to have continuous fantasies that I might meet a cute boy on vacation and have some cinematic, brief vacation boyfriend romance. This never freaking ever happened. In truth, the only other kids around were 2 little girls staying at their cottage nearby who wanted to play with us whenever we were outside. I did get a Dorset t-shirt. I wonder what happened to that. I really didn't appreciate bugs at that point. At the back of the cottage was a screened-in porch bedroom that I thought would be amazing when we first arrived, and I immediately claimed it for my own. I had this whole vision of waking up in the morning, watching the sunrise over a sparkling lake down below, and really finding my inner nature girl. Instead, the porch light had attracted a ton of those water flies. The porch had loads of mosquitoes in it, and those awful mosquito hawks, which is what we called those flying things that look like giant mosquitoes but don't actually bite you. I don't even need to tell you how much I did not appreciate those. I was trying to deal with it, but when a spider started crawling over my blanket, I knew it was time to abandon ship. Not much better was sleeping with my little sister, who slept like a maniac. One night she flopped over in her sleep so her head was at my feet, and I blearily sat her back up and turned her back around. I didn't appreciate that we also came up north during monster fly season. Great big meaty flies that bite you and actually seem to take a small chunk of skin out of you. One bit me right on the butt when I was swimming one day. And they chase you. They actually chase you, and for a lot farther than you would think. So there was literally nothing to do other than, I don't know, try to not get bit by something and enjoy nature. In most cottages, people who owned them didn't have televisions because they liked the outdoorsy life so much that would occupy their time. I guess you could play cards or board games or something, and peeing at night was an adventure if you were brave enough to feel your way through the pitch black to the outhouse or use the chamber pot. Mom was bored, and teenage me was bored. Brother was 17 and at home having the time of his life because an older teen loves nothing better than having the whole house to himself. That was the year Live Aid happened. Brother had a slew of blank VHS tapes lined up to record it for us. We called him on the phone a couple of times to see how he was doing, and he feigned missing us. So after only a few days of nothing to do, bugs, and 0 cute boys, we all felt like we missed Brother. And he clearly must have been lonely, and we used that as an excuse to con Dad into taking us home. Poor Dad was disappointed. We surprised Brother with our early return, and I'll never forget how opposite to pleased he was when we got home. He was, in fact, pissed. I was so stunned by his surly reaction. I only had a toe in teenagerhood at that point, so clearly I didn't get it. It's funny now, but we all took it personally at the time. May 22nd, 2021. Thoughts. I had a very bad day of anxiety yesterday. As soon as I got up, Hubs told me the company he works for had been bought out by their competitor, and he'd only just found out from work that day before. The day he found out was also the day the government released an update as to what the plan will be to reopen Ontario after endless pandemic lockdowns. I had been making very good progress with anxiety. I feel like every time I start to feel really good, and I mean really, really good, happy, accepting, more relaxed, something happens in life that throws me back a good step. I've had a very, very difficult time the past year. I have had a great deal of difficulty with how unkind many people have been, how much hostility I've seen, how much fear has been flooded out to the masses. I had to find a way to tune most of that out and keep going. I have been working steadily to not fight the current, but rather learn to flow with it and find beauty and opportunity for growth and success along the way. This means that in life there will be a great many things I can neither control nor fix. It's a hard lesson, but it's an important one that I am learning. I want to fix things. I want to solve problems. I want to do this very badly at times. I want to leap in and offer what I think are good ideas and solutions to help stop anguish and suffering. But I am learning that not everyone is open to this help, and I have become depleted over the years in the process. So like I've said, I've been trying to learn the art of flow and finding success in the midst of chaos and less than pleasant situations. Success can mean more consistent happiness, finding more moments of joy throughout the day, finding new ways to treat myself better, be better, feel better. I try to avoid drama, but I don't live under a rock and it seems to find me anyway. And I'm just trying to keep my kids' spirits up through all this. So those are my current challenges to work through.